Salam alaikum. This week's class will actually be just freeform. Due to scheduling conflicts, our main two teachers will not be available, and an actual cancellation of this week's class was made on the main WhatsApp group. I missed that myself, so if you did too, I apologize. I will open the class or the session with Al Fatiha, as we always do, and I'll wait to see if anybody cares to join us. If there's no more participants by quarter after, I will shut us down. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-sirata mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta alaihim ghayril maghdubi alaihim waladdallin. Thank you. Anybody listening later? Right now, no one has joined us. We're free form right now, so I'm going to take a moment here to put a commercial in. I've recently published a book based on the website Islam Awakened. It's named after the website Islam Awakened, but its purpose is to give people an intro to studying the Quran based solely on the Quran. How to find out how the Quran tells us to study the Quran. That is the whole purpose of the book, and I hope you get a chance to take a look at it. It's available in hard printed format, softback, hardback, or using Kindle. The essential guidance is, as I said, use the Quran to study the Quran. And it tries to approach it at a very kindergarten level. This class, this QB40 class, goes much deeper. If you have already studied the Quran and you want to understand how good teachers who understand it well will help you understand it deeper, going hard into the Arabic language, knowing what the Quran really means when it says what it says, I recommend staying with this class. Don't try to use my book as a substitute. This class goes deep into how each Arabic word is used in many places in the Quran. It is useful for really grasping that depth of meaning. So far, nobody else seems to be joining us, but I'll try to keep talking. Let me turn off my camera and try to give you some information from my book. Again, I'm just going to use this empty space as a commercial. The initial introduction to my book basically says, why the Quran alone? And we all who follow the Quran alone hear the same complaints and questions from traditionalists. The usual one is, what about the Hadith? What about the scholars? How can you understand Islam without traditional sources? Or the oft repeated, every textbook needs a teacher. These questions are important questions and they deserve thoughtful answers. I try to examine the scriptural foundation for treating the Quran as a complete guidance, the precise role that Allah has assigned to Prophet Muhammad in the Quran, and the practical problems that arise when we supplement divine teaching with human collections. The case for Quran-centered Islam isn't based on some modern innovation. We often get accused that this is some Orientalist invention of the 20th century. Quite the contrary, it emerged directly from the book when it was sent down to Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Quran's own testimony tells us this. The most compelling reason to rely on the Quran alone comes from many, many verses in the Quran. We have not neglected anything in the book. That's Al-An'am 6:38. Today I have perfected your religion for you and completed my favor upon you. Al-Ma'idah 5:3. We have sent down the book to you as clarification for all things. Annal 1689. If we accept these statements from Allah as true, then there's no argument with them. That's what He told us. What exactly do we need beyond what He told us? Either the Quran is complete as it claims, or it isn't. If it is complete, then additional sources aren't necessary for guidance. If it isn't complete, then its own statements about completeness are inaccurate, a position no Muslim can comfortably hold. Either we accept the Quran as from Allah and true, or we do not. There isn't any gray area in the middle. Yes, we can debate the meaning of this verse or that and disagree. Disagreement is good, but completely rejecting statements that Allah makes about the completeness of the Quran is not something we as believers can do. What about the Prophet? Why didn't he come here to explain it all to us and say more than just the Quran? That's a common claim. But the Quran says different. The messenger's duty is only to convey the message clearly. I'm not making that up. That's a verse. That's An-Nur 24:54. Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is told, say, I follow only what is revealed to me. Al-An'am 650. And again, and if he had made up about us some false saying, we would have seized him by the right hand. Al-Haqqa 69:44 through 45. This doesn't diminish the Prophet Muhammad's role. He had to bring this message to a wild and uncontrolled people, Jahiliyyah times. But he had to deliver the message perfectly. And that's what he did. When we follow the Quran, we're following exactly what he was told to bring us. I could go on about the problems with supplementing all this with human invention. Hang on, we got somebody coming in. Assalamu alaikum, Wesley. So far, Wesley, you're the first additional participant to join since the class was officially canceled, but I'm keeping it open for anybody who didn't get that message. Let's see if anybody wants to join us. How are you doing today?
Assalamu alaikum, brother. I'm doing fine.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
I was using spare time opening up the class, basically air a commercial about my book, but we don't have to stay on that theme. What's been happening in your life? How is Allah assisting you?
Nothing much is going much. Actually, I'm having some time actually with Arabic learning. I'm still trying to figure out the Arabic languages, the Arabic letters actually first. That's what I'm doing now.
Excellent.
Yes.
There's some good material out there. If you want, I can send you a link to it for the beginning to just learn the alphabet, because there are some interesting little variations in how to handle different letters in that alphabet,
Yes, actually.
depending on
Yes.
context.
You can send me the link actually because I'll be using with the one I have right now that
Very
Dr.
good.
Musa sent me the other time.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah, the best teacher around for it, as far as I'm concerned, is Dr. Musa. There's some
Yeah.
classes out there you can take as well, but those, I think being with a group of people who are also learning Arabic is important. That's something I did not do, and I miss it.
Yeah, learning Arabic is very important. I can see because I really need to read the Quran on my own.
I mean, in my own case, I've always had some sort of mental block
You know,
about
now
learning.
my network is coming bad.
Pardon?
My network, I don't know what's happening to my network now.
In my own case, I have a mental block for learning languages. I took 4 years of Spanish in high school, and I can barely order food in a Mexican restaurant. So I've also tried to learn German, same thing. I get so far and I get a mental block. But in a way that has been a blessing, Allah does what he does for his own reasons. If I had been able to learn Arabic when I first came to Islam, I would have just dove into the Quran and that would have just been my course. But because I had to read translations and I found some verses rendered in English that didn't sound like something that Allah would actually say to us, I read other translations. And then I read some other translations and I began to realize they're not all rendering quite the same meaning. And that inspired me to start to put them together into a website, which is how Islam Awakened came to be. Now, that's been growing for 22 years now, since 2003. And now we're up to 70 different translations that can be compared. For any one verse, you can compare all 71, 72 now,
But
actually.
that is too much translations. Actually, I've been using some translations also here. I'm using some like 4 translations to actually understand the real Quran, the real verses.
Right.
Sometimes was the times I can read the verse and doesn't get me a rightful meaning or something like common sense. Then I have to compare it with another Quran again with another translation so that maybe it can make sense to me.
I would like to welcome Ms. Ilya, am I pronouncing that right, to the class? You're
Yes, you are pronouncing it right.
all right, welcome aboard. Officially, this particular session was canceled last week because Sister Musa was not going to be able to run the class. But I know not everybody got the message, so I've opened up the Zoom just so that we could basically have a conversation. This is unstructured, open conversation for this session. We're treating it kind of like class 6.5, not class number 7. So uh,
Oh,
right
yes,
now,
thank you so much for clarifying that last week was canceled. I was genuinely a bit thought that it was getting canceled completely. Thank you for mentioning that.
not a problem. Glad to clear it up a little bit. I will put it up. I will put our discussion up on the podcast just as though it were regular class, so people don't think we completely ignored them. The
Mm.
discussion that Brother Wesley and I were having before you joined us was about translations and how, as we're studying Arabic for the Quran, how we have to use translations and they don't always agree. It's interesting. You can find one verse, and in some cases, I use Islam Awakened because I'm the author of that. I have collected up to 70 translations for each verse. A few don't have translations. Some of the translations are incomplete. But if you look at all these different translations, sometimes the meanings are far apart, and that can be confusing. I find some translations are seem to be consistent with my understanding the Arabic, but my understanding the Arabic is very limited. But the fact that 70 different human beings can come up with 70 different meanings of a phrase or sentence in Arabic is astounding. It just human beings do this. We apply our own human experiences in our life to a phrase when we hear it. Yeah,
Yes, you are
that's
completely right. I 100% agree with you because lots of translations are completely incorrect and sometimes even misogynistic, I'm sorry to say.
no,
Because
you're
hear
absolutely
me
right.
out. Yes, because hear me out. There is like thousands of words where we have mistranslated as humans nowadays, such as the word khimar. It does not mean headscarf. I'm going to clear that up very strongly. Sorry about that.
No, no problem. That's one of the natures of
Yes,
being on
so
Zoom.
humor. Yeah, so humor actually means everything that covers anything. Literally, anything
Yeah,
that covers anything. That is the meaning of humor. And then there's a bunch of other words. The actual word for headscarf is mikna. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm not good with pronunciations.
understood. That is my understanding as well. Originally, it was a body cover, and the wives of the prophet were told to pull it up over their heads if they were out in public because of who they were, for their own protection. They were not implicitly supposed to be wearing something over their head all the time. That's my understanding of the verses in question. And of course, traditionalists do not agree with me, but that's to
Yes,
be
that is.
expected.
Hmm. Yes, that is very correct. Although personally, I would have suggested that the wives were told to stay in their homes, like only the wives, as said in the
Mhm.
verse.
Yes.
Instead of cherry picking, I'm not talking about you, by the way, I'm talking about the world. Okay?
Hmm.
Don't get me wrong over here. So, like, most people interpret the verse, I think, I don't remember, but it's about the wives staying at home and stay in your houses.
Yeah,
It's about the wives, not about anyone. It's in the same verse, even.
I understand.
So, why do we cherry pick on that? I hate cherry picking personally.
You said the word, you said misogynistic. The old Jahiliya culture was very, misogynistic and male supremacist. And when
Exactly.
Islam came along, it says, no, that is not the reality. The reality, we have sent blessings to both men and women if they are believers. But there are a lot of people that don't like that. They were uncomfortable with it. And once the Quran was done being revealed and the Prophet Saleh Wasallam was called back to Allah, the traditions tried to fold themselves back into Islam and say, no, we want to do things the old way. And again,
Yes.
the traditionalists won't like people saying that, but that's what happened.
Yeah, also true. Because nowadays there's still some hypocrites that change the meaning of Quran's words, Quran's liberalism for women, etc.,
Mhm.
to make it sound misogynistic.
Yes. Darabah is another classic example. The
I'm
correct
sorry?
under uh, my pronunciation is bad too. Darabah, to beat. That is not what the
Ah,
verse is saying in that particular case. There are many versions of that, many understandings that can come out of that one root. And beating a wife is not one of those correct understandings. And there's two reasons to understand the correct, that is incorrect and that what the correct meaning is. The first reason is that if you look at that use of that word all through the Quran and all through Arabic, it can mean to separate. So in that context, if a husband is having problem with a wife, it doesn't say to go straight to beating her. It says more to ostracize her, to separate from her, so she doesn't have the comfort of company within the house as the last resort before divorce. And that makes perfect sense. Nobody likes to be ostracized. If you try to translate it as beating, now that becomes a form of oppression. And the Quran clearly says that oppression is worse than slaughter. So, how can we be told to beat a wife since that would be oppression and oppression is worse than slaughter? That makes no sense at all. And the Quran always makes sense. So, it's the translation that's bad. That's just my understanding of it. Allahu Allah.
that is absolutely correct because this is one of the virtues of the Quran that oppression, no matter what, is not allowed. No matter what.
I
There's
mean,
a virtue of the Quran. Yes, my understanding, I like to word it in a very different way. It's the same as yours, but worded is different. I believe that the Quran's word for, the word you said, the riba, I believe that that word actually means to hit. And by to hit, the Arabic's meaning means a light tap, which goes to show that you can't even do that in your normal marriage. Only as a last resort, even. A light tap. Shocking.
I know that in Arabic, if I'm trying to separate the whites and yolk from an egg, the word for that has also got the same root, separating. So I'm not even sure if light tap is correct. But again, we don't know. We have to say what's consistent with the rest of the Quran.
Hmm. Okay. You might be right, actually, because a light tap means to scare the other person, which you're not supposed to do. That's also a form of oppression. So, yes, I do agree with you in this sense. Thank you.
You're very welcome. One of the discussions that I was starting to have with Wesley is the fact that we have so many translations and they don't agree with each other. And it is my belief that having a lot of translations can be a tool for those of us who are language impaired. I have tried to learn foreign languages many times in my life, Arabic, Spanish, German. And in fact, when I first tried to learn a foreign language, it was in high school and it was Spanish, and I took years of Spanish and it would not stick. And I'm sure if I went back and tried again, it would be a little bit easier. But I also come to realize that I don't have the aptitude for a foreign language. Give me a computer language. Oh, and that's I'm going to be in on that real quick. But give me a human language, I have to wade through it like I'm wading through wet cement. And it may be that Allah held me back so that I could collect more translations together to present the differences so that people could see the wide spectrum of human meanings that people give to the word of Allah. Those differences aren't necessarily wrong. They just need to tell us that it requires us to study the Quran with care, which he tells us to do anyway. Again, that's just my opinion. Allah is the one who knows.
Yes, I completely agree with you because most translations, and by most, I mean a bunch of them, go against the virtues of the Quran. This is one
I
thing
agree.
I'm annoyed about. They go against the literal virtues of the Quran. Like, dude, no, that specific translation is correct but does not apply to what the Quran is saying.
Exactly. A literal translation of a given verse can be far off of the spirit of the Quran and the spirit of the story being told in that surah. And that takes a while for some people to catch on to.
Agreed.
And as for people who are told to memorize everything in Arabic and never mind what the translation to your native language means, I feel sorry for them. There is just no real help being given to them by doing that. In a number of foreign countries, uh, people who don't speak Arabic are told to memorize large portions of the Quran, but they aren't taught what the meaning is. And I have a hard time grasping what the teachers think they are gaining, their students are gaining from that. Yeah.
Yes, I have personally experienced this actually. I was told, okay, yes, your translation reading is correct, but you have to memorize in Arabic first. That's better for you. And I was like, no, because I personally believe that there's no point in learning the Quran if I don't understand the language.
I mean,
Yes.
Yeah, actually, that's the truth. Even here, where I am in Zimbabwe, Actually, people are memorizing the Quran before they can even understand the wording of it. It's very difficult after actually, if you memorize the Quran, the Arabic, but not knowing the very meaning of the words. That is very, actually, I don't even understand it, what is happening.
Yes, because let's just say, as an example, namaz. As we know, salah, namaz, whatever you call it. In it,
Yes.
you're supposed to worship to Allah. Okay? You're supposed to worship to Allah. And the
Right.
thing is, if you don't know what you're saying, how do you even know you're a Muslim if you say the Shahada?
Right.
I went a bit off topic very quickly, sorry.
That's okay.
But, hmm, so if you say the
And we
Shahada, but
we
you
have just
don't
been
know what
joined by,
you're
let me interrupt you for a moment, sister. We've just been joined by Dr. Hanan, and I want to welcome Dr.
oh,
Hanan.
yeah.
This is a unstructured day in our class. We can call it 6B. It's not an
السلام
official
عليكم.
part of the Walaikum Assalam, and welcome
Alaikum
aboard.
assalam.
This is an
Welcome.
open discussion day, doctor. So what we're talking about right now is two things. We're talking about translations of the Quran, and the immediate subject was how, in many cultures, students and children are taught to recite the Quran in Arabic before they're ever taught what the Quran is actually saying, and how that, in the opinion of at least three people on the board right now, and I'm sure you probably agree with us, having a child memorize something from the Quran without understanding what it is saying is of no real use. But feel free to chime in.
Okay, so I'll continue.
Please do.
If a non-Muslim, if a non-Muslim converts to Islam and he says the Shahada, but he doesn't know what it means, how does he know what Tawheed is? How does he know Allah is one? How does he know the Prophet Muhammad is the last Prophet of Allah? How? That's the point. So you should be learning the translation along with Arabic
Thank you.
if you're reading Arabic.
Thank you.
Mm.
In my own personal case, I came to Islam through the old Yusuf Ali translation before I knew a single word of Arabic. And even then, while reading that translation, I occasionally came onto a verse that didn't ring true to me. A lot of the translation was like, this is what I've been waiting for. This sounds like the voice of my creator. This is what God would say to a person. This is what God would say to humanity. So I read that book voraciously, but then I would run into a verse like, and again, this is the old original Yusuf Ali translation. Don't take the Jews and Christians as friends. That doesn't sound like something that Allah would tell people. And when I came to learn some other translations, the word being translated originally by Yusuf Ali as friends was awliya, the plural of wali. And a wali is a lot more than just a friend. A wali is somebody I would trust with my entire life savings. Go take this at the bank for me, or go tell the woman I want to marry, go that I want to talk to her father. Person you trust with something very important, a mentor or a spiritual guide, but it's not just a casual friend. I can have Jews and Christians as casual friends. Allah is not going to forbid that. In fact, it's very hard to invite someone to the word of Allah if they're not a friend and you're not being a friend. There's a person I follow on Facebook a lot who's a rabbi. He's got some good points, of course, because he's reading stuff that was old revelation. And I haven't seen him go off course once. He doesn't speak in favor of Zionism in Israel. He doesn't like it. So this is the guy that I would not trust him with my life savings, or I would not tell him, go tell my wife I want to talk to her. But this is a man I like to hear what he has to say. So understanding the Quran through just a single translation can be dangerous. If I didn't have
Exactly.
Yeah, if I didn't have some guidance from my creator, I might have swallowed that one verse hook, line, and sinker. okay, and then hated the Christians and Jews. Would have been the wrong way to go. But he helped me feel the fact that that verse as translated did not fit the rest of the book as translated and sent me into other translations to look for more. We have what Christians call that small, still voice in the back of our minds. That small, still voice, our conscience, that's put there by our Creator. That's Him giving us little hints along the way when we're doing the right thing or hearing the right thing versus hearing the wrong thing. And we have to trust that voice in the back of our heads when we see things like a translation that could be an error. But the comparison I've used many times with multiple translations, I'll be going off topic here for a bit, but there was a Hollywood actress back in the 30s and 40s by the name of Hedy Lamarr. You may have heard of her. She was famous in her day. And you think, what does a Hollywood actress have to do with Islam? I will tell you, she wasn't just an actress. When she wasn't on screen, this woman was inventing things. And she invented something called spread spectrum radio. It was an important invention when they came to World War II. It basically taught the Allies how to send out a signal on multiple different channels at once. Okay, not just one channel, multiple channels at once. And then the person with the receiver would be only tuned into those multiple channels at the same time. So they would add up the signal from the 5 channels and get a clear message through. If the Germans or whoever the enemy was at that time tried to jam the signal, they would jam this frequency over there, or they would jam that frequency over there. But all in all, they couldn't jam it all. So it basically helped do a whole bunch of good things for defeating the Nazis in World War II. Why do I mention all that? Because for those of us who don't know Arabic, if you study 5 or 6 different translations in English, any one translation can be jammed by the shaitan. He can whisper into the translator, word it this way or word it that way. But if I read 5 different translations of the same verse, some of the truth is going to come through and some of the human and shaitanic noise is going to get drowned out. I will get better understanding because the whispers of the shaitan cannot work equally on all those translations. But that's just my understanding and my theory of how good lots of translations can help some of us. And I'll get off my soapbox. Thank you.
That makes a lot of sense. You took the words out of my heart. Honestly, amazing. Well, this is an amazing understanding.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's actually, I've learned something anyway, because reading 5 translations, it really helps a lot than just reading one translation, actually.
Agreed. I would like to mention about one of the examples you said. Okay, don't make friends with Christians or Jews. I would like to address that. So I personally think that that translation doesn't really make sense, like you said, because if Allah said to treat everyone kindly, that doesn't exactly mean that we shouldn't see Christians and Jews as not human simply because of their religion. That's bias.
I mean, true Torah true Jews and non-Trinitarian Christians are based on the Islam of their day. When Moses came with the original Torah or Tanakh, he was bringing what is essentially the Quran as it needed to be for his people in his time. When Jesus came with the Injil, he was bringing the Quran as it needed to be for his people in his time. It wasn't the Quran we see, but we constantly get reminded of the book and the wisdom, that pair of words, you know, the Kitab and Al Hikmah are put together often in the Quran, but I'm not the first person to come up with this idea, but I understand it this way. Those 2 words do not mean 2 separate documents. A lot of traditionalists, believers in Hadith, say that we have Al-Kitab, the Quran, and the Hadith contain the hikmah, the wisdom. No, that's not how it works. What those two words refer to are the book is the laws that don't change from revelation to revelation. When we talk about the Kitab, Al-Kitab was the same for Moses, for Abraham, for Solomon, for David, for Jesus, Isa, and for Muhammad and us. The Tab is the fixed rules that we have to follow. Those rules have not changed. There will be no change in the Sunnah of Allah. But with each people, you had to bring along some wisdom that fit their culture in their time. And the hikmah that came with Moses fit Moses's people. The hikmah that came with Isa was the wisdom that fit his people, the Jews that wanted to follow the new revelation for those people. And then finally, since we can't follow the old ones, we just wouldn't do that job. Allah sent the final, same top, the same set of fixed rules with the final wisdom that is for all time, for all people. And that's the Quran. It's not two separate documents, it's the wisdom and the book woven together into the final revelation. Again, I'm getting on my soapbox and I apologize. Salam alaikum.
Oh, no, 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 don't apologize. Continue talking. It's very interesting to see how you speak. It's wonderful. Your speech is wonderful.
Jazakallah khair. I don't want to hog this class session. Dr. Hanan, do you have anything for us?
Well, yeah, when I joined you guys, I liked like how you mentioned the importance of learning the meanings of the Quran, not only reciting the Quran. Especially among children, because if you notice, guys, that children kind of pulling away from the Quran. They don't want to memorize it because it becomes very boring for them just to reciting it or memorizing it or being forced to go to the masjid just to compete with the other children. I think understanding the meaning will encourage them to love the Quran and also help them to build some values from early age, um, kind of understanding Allah and His rules. And yeah, I think this is what I have.
Indeed. I'd like to welcome Syed. He just joined us.
It's pronounced Sayyid, actually.
Syed.
Yes.
Again, being languages. And I know the
Yeah.
man. I met him in Houston, so I should know that. Welcome, Syed.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How you all doing?
Better than I deserve.
Oh, that's nice. That's good. I like that answer. Me
I
here.
stole that
Same here.
answer from a podcaster. I'll tell the truth.
Same here.
But I
Same.
like that answer. It is absolutely on point for many of us. When
Yes.
you joined us, we were talking about two subjects, translations and how studying multiple translations is better than just getting hard focused on just one translation. For those of us who don't speak Arabic and haven't fully learned it yet. And the other subject that's also important is what we're doing to our children. We're in many masajid and especially in other cultures, we're forcing young children to memorize the Quran in Arabic and learning how to recite it without teaching them what it means. And in my humble opinion, that is a guaranteed way to chase a young person away from Islam. It becomes a chore. it becomes something, the boring piece of my free time that's being taken away by all these people saying things I don't even understand. We should not be doing that to our children. We should be teaching them the Quran, but we should be teaching them what it is telling them in terms they understand. If it's a very young child, we don't need to be talking about a man gets four wives and things like that. They're not going to understand that kind of thing. But there are things in the Quran that a young child can understand in their own language. Stories of what's happened in the past that were right and what was happening in the past that were wrong and how the wrongs were corrected. These are lessons that are invaluable for our children as they're growing up. But we're not teaching them those things. We're teaching them how to say Bismillah Rahman Rahim before they even understand what that means. It's that's one of my hot buttons. Don't cram our deen down our children's throats. And I may be offending people when I say that, but that's what I see all the time. We drag our children into the masjid and make them sit there and listen to foreign languages that they don't understand. What is the good of that? Now, I had one a mom back in Houston that I would talk to often. She had an opinion. He would give a message of both the translation and the Arabic, and he would tell this is while introducing people to Islam. He invited Christians to come in and just hear about Islam, and he would play some Arabic from the Quran, and then he would give the translation. And he said, the way we see it, the translation is what you need to understand, but listening to the Arabic is the medicine. It was a nice thought, but I'm not sure how true that is. Anybody want to give their opinion?
Yes, me. So I would like to give my opinion that honestly, if you listen to it, Allah gave a specific melody, a specific, like, I don't want to say it exactly, but like a magic in it. I know this isn't the accurate depiction, but I'm trying to
Understand?
explain it. Yeah. So,
There is a
so that's
divine
why when
rhythm
you
to it.
listen to it, thank you. So that's why when you listen to it, it heals your heart. And secondly, your point about if you make a child listen to another language, he wouldn't like it. It honestly depends on the circumstance because personally, if you make me listen to a Russian song, I might like it. I might like it.
Indeed.
Yeah. Russian, Portuguese songs, they're my favorite, personally.
My
And the
ancestry
Quran
is
healing song?
Ukrainian and I love it.
Yeah. I don't
I'm sorry, didn't
understand
mean to
Russian
interrupt.
or Portuguese.
Didn't mean to interrupt.
Like,
I apologize. Keep going.
it's okay. I don't understand Portuguese or Russian, but the songs are really catchy. And then the Quran's, Allah specifically put His blessings in the Quran's wording as He revealed the words of the Quran. So that's why, for some people, and maybe even basically everyone, I might say, it feels healing to you. That's why many people cry while they listen to the Arabic Quran.
Indeed. I'll quite often play the some MP3s that give the Arabic and then the English and have that on in the background, for hours. And I find that very soothing. The There are some Hafizes that speak the Quran or recite the Quran in a deep voice, and those I find extremely comforting. There are others where I don't want to insult anybody, so I don't know how to say it. It almost like sounds like the guy is whining and crying. And that to me is like fingernails on a blackboard. I'd rather listen to the English translation than that. But fortunately, there's some really good ones out there too. It seems to be a tradition in some cultures to have that very high-pitched voice when reciting the
Uh,
Quran.
Sorry to interrupt you,
Go
but
ahead.
as a person who has dealt with sects before,
Hmm.
I this is more this whining thing you described is more common in Shia, I think.
Is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah.
Here in the States, I've had very little interaction with Shias. There was one or two Shia-centric masajid in Houston. Now that I'm way up here in Maine, it's basically all traditional Sunni. So far, I have not yet run into something that is Quran-centric, and we need to have that someday.
Well, most
Your
of these
audio dropped, Greg.
Me? Well, hang on, let me turn it off and back on. Any better? Can anybody hear me?
Yes,
yes,
yes.
I
Yeah.
can hear you.
Okay.
I can barely hear you guys. I have no idea what's going on.
Oh, sorry, we are speaking very lightly. So,
I'll lean into the microphone a little bit more. Hopefully that'll help.
yeah.
If you know your Zoom, there's a way to turn on footnotes. I mean, subtext as well, subtitles.
It was actually pretty good about 2 minutes ago, or a
Okay.
minute ago, earlier, right? It just dropped. Let me check. Is my phone volume is
I
to the
noticed
top?
you were moving. I noticed you were moving from one room to room. That might have had an effect.
Okay, let me leave and come back. All right, let me
Okay.
try that.
All right.
I'm also moving from room to room. I'm walking.
That will occasionally make a difference depending on your Wi-Fi internet connection.
Yes, true. Anyway, so like I was saying, I am from Pakistan, which I forgot to mention. And most of these sect related things happen here,
Right.
actually. So it's more of in the subcontinent rather than other countries, such as the States, like you mentioned.
Right. Most of the traditionalists here have migrated here from the subcontinent and other places. We also have a minority that originate from, hang on, let's see, head back in. Can you hear me any better now, Syed?
Yes, much better.
All right.
It's
We moved
Sayyid.
on to the, all right. We just moved on to the subject of where the different sects form. And Ilya has said that over in the subcontinent, we get a lot of that. And I also mentioned here in the States, we had a group that was formed back in the 1930s that were kind of an American version of the Ahmadiyya. They had created their own, you know, prophet after Muhammad. And I'm not going to go into all the details of what they believed, but the bulk of them broke away from that, that pseudo sect and became Sunni. So that's another subsect that we have here in the United States. They followed the son of that, I'll say it out loud, false prophet, W.D. Muhammad. And he did some good teaching. He brought people into proper Islam. Maybe not all the way to Quran centric Islam that we all here love, but they were taking certainly a step in the right direction. But those, I would say, are the major segments of American Islam that we see immigrants and, the Black Muslim breakaways. I don't know what the right non-insulting term is, but the people who didn't stay with Elijah Muhammad and who actually rejoined traditional Islam. And that has been a positive effect on American culture, in my understanding. It helped me come to Islam. But
Sadly, true.
I'm hogging the microphone. We have about 10 minutes left of our scheduled class time. Anybody else wants to join in? Again, this is an unstructured, break from our regular classes because our main two teachers aren't going to be here. You have
Yeah, I
anything
noticed that. Kind of.
that was the whole problem. Dr. Musa had a scheduling conflict because of something happening in Oregon that she wanted to attend. And I don't know, I don't remember the details. I'm getting at that age where I don't remember things all that well. But the point is, we can still touch bases and share information and mutually consult. Would you care to add in anything, Syed?
Oh, yes, I'll actually add in a point about hadiths,
Okay.
considering that hadiths actually include plenty of false ones. Sometimes there are sahih hadiths that are actually false, goes against multiple principles of the Quran, and then there's hadiths that are ranked false, that are in no category false, and are actually true.
But we aren't given a tool to say which are which, except for the Quran, are we?
Yeah, I know this is a bit off topic from the Quran, but
I don't know. That's why we're
I
here.
have researched, sorry, I have researched a couple of hadiths, so that's why I said this.
Mhm. I guess my real problem with Hadith and Hadith collections is they don't have the promise of protection that Allah has given His Quran. So
That's
as they come down from narrator to narrator to narrator, we don't know how much of that got flavored by the individual narrators that it passed through. And I'm going to give you a non Hadith example of what I'm talking about.
it's sure.
Centuries and centuries ago, the Jews had a golden rule that said, do not do unto your neighbor what you would find hateful for yourself. And that's a good rule. That was the Judaic golden rule. I believe it traces back to Rabbi Hillel. Reason I bring it up is as that idea passed into Christianity, it got turned into a double negative, into do unto others what you would have them as you would have them do unto you. Okay? Not refrain from doing things you don't want done, but actively do what you would want done. Well, that's crossing a line as I understand it. I don't want other people doing unto me what they think is the thing they would want done unto them. If they thought they were a witch and the devil was inside them, maybe they want to get burned. I don't want to get burned at the stake if you think I'm a witch. I'm exaggerating that, but that's the problem with this active golden rule principle that Christianity distorted the Judaic golden rule into. And that same kind of distortion can happen anytime humans and humans alone pass something down from generation to generation. And every hadith other than the best hadith, the Quran, has come down to us that way without the promise of protection that Allah has given His Quran. And again, I'm getting on my soapbox and I apologize.
No, don't apologize. It's pretty reasonable, actually. I've been the main one going off topic.
No, we're allowed to. This is what this intermediate session's all about.
Yes. And you're very correct about the hadith not having the protection of Allah, because if you think about it, the Quran said itself that it is complete. It is complete in all ways. Nothing is abrogated, nothing in it is silenced. And as for hadith, it's a mere tafsir of the Quran, which, if some people do not understand or accidentally misinterpret, they can understand from the hadith, which was back then. But nowadays, there are too many fabrications for us to actually consider them. And I am going a bit off topic, but my personal experience was with a Quran verse, which my mom explained later. It was about a verse that said that no, no scripture of ours is fabricated, that what we have sent down. This isn't an accurate wording. I'm saying it from memory, from the theme of the verse, if you understand. So, and I thought it meant something else, completely opposite.
That can happen.
It's a bit embarrassing, but I thought that the verse meant that the prophet wasn't a human. So my mom had to explain to me hurriedly that no, that's not what it means. It means that Allah, He did not allow the prophets to lie. They're completely human, but He did not allow them to lie. So yes, hadiths are a mere tafsir for understanding, but sometimes, especially in nowadays, it is a huge test for us. We have to understand, we have to interpret ourselves, and we have to ignore the hadiths, considering that almost half of them, we don't know if they're false or not, considering there are too many fabrications nowadays. Am I right?
I have no doubt that there are gems of truth in the Hadith. I have absolutely no doubt of that. Unfortunately, we're looking at a pile of gold coins mixed with a pile of iron pyrite coins. All right, false gold. All right. How do I pick out the real coins? We can't. We don't have the tools, except, of course, for the Quran. If I pick up a hadith and I say, okay, to the best of my understanding, this matches the spirit of the Quran, that's good, but it's still my understanding. Even if I'm a fluent Arabic speaker, I'm still taking this human phrase from a human collection of hadith and trying to say, yes, this agrees with what Allah says in His book. I might be 99% right, but there's that other 1% of danger.
Yes, you are correct. I have the same point as you, but the thing is, I can sometimes express it. I'm not really good at expressing my opinions, so it might come off as something different. I'm very sorry if it did.
No, I like what you had to say. There is truth in some hadith. We just have to be careful making that part of our deen.
Yes.
That is, I think,
I
that's the transgression. Okay. Like I follow what my physics textbook says, and I follow what my um, tax guideline says, but I don't make them part of my deen. If I'm making that's maybe not quite the comparison that makes sense, but there's something outside the Quran that says behave this way. And in the context of what that particular instruction is talking about, yes, I will behave that way. But only the Quran can tell me this is how to behave as part of my deen. And I can't join those two. Okay. The law tells me not to steal, which is fine. That's exactly what the Quran tells me. All right. That doesn't mean that it's part of my deen because man can change that law. Okay. Man cannot change the Quran. And I have hogged some of this class session. We are approaching 5 o'clock. Does anybody want to chime in and say anything before we end the session? Or if you all want to, we can keep going.
I feel like we should keep going.
Okay.
The tempo is great right now. So
Any other votes?
Earlier, when you were saying about the Quran, how somebody or many Muslims claim that you have to know Arabic, right? Or you have to be Arabs, right? Arab, blah, blah, blah. So Allah does not say anywhere in the Quran that the Quran is for the Arabs or it is only for those people who know Arabic language. So which would be Lughat al-Arabiya. So Allah did not use Lughat. Allah used the word lisan, tongue of the Arabs, right? So I wonder why the Arabs invented this notion, right? I learned Arabic, by the way. So even learning that, it does not give me or give anybody who knows Arabic the higher chance of knowing what Allah is saying, because Allah in the Quran is very clear. Wattaqullah, be mindful of Allah, wa yu'allimukumullah, and He will teach you. It is Allah who teaches the Quran, not the Prophet. Bless his soul, for 23 years that he had lived, right? We have barely about 10 or 11 hadith that barely explains any of the verses exactly from him. It is narrated that allegedly somebody heard, like Ibn Abbas or what's his name, Abu Huraira or Bibi Aisha, they heard that Prophet allegedly said this about this ayah. We have not a single hadith in any of the 59 books besides the six Sahih, right? That you will find one hadith, right? I did a lot of research on this thing that can claim this is ahad, meaning this is a or mutawatir hadith. It came directly from the Prophet. There is no other chain of narrations, right? We don't have that. So Allah must have intended the Quran for the later generation to for them to interpret it themselves for their time being, for their timeline. That way they can expound from it whatever that they feel best for their time. To have this notion that only they know Quran, who had studied the Arabic or knows Arabic. No, if you're not mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you are not setting yourself up to find these self-consistent rules in the Quran, how the verses are so connected, right? The surahs are connected too. Each surah is connected to the next surah in a very fantastic way, but you have to understand, you have to invest time in the book, right? Then the basic algorithm of the universe, meaning cosmology, some physics, some metaphysics, some mathematics. It helps to know the Quran better. You can connect the dots. So you don't have to be an Arab or know Arabic, right? So that you can claim, no, I got the right meaning. Only Allah has the right meaning. Allah says in the Quran, in the judgment day, He will tell us where we differed. Not now. Okay? So we can have some differences, but we shouldn't go about it creating a sect because we differ, or creating some other in the line of ideology or belief system, or because this group of people say Quran means that. It's okay. We have the one main important theme, foundation, that is God and His prophets and messengers. We accept all of them. No discrimination, no any kind of differentiation between amongst them. So we're good. And Hadith, I mean, Greg, how I feel about Hadith. I studied that. Yeah, it's good. It has some basic knowledge in there, some historical documents there, right? You can find some truth in there, some gem, all that. But they are not supposed to be your aqidah. Somebody wants to believe in them, that's fine. But you need Quran. That's your primary text. That's your foundation. Like you said before, it's Hasan al Hadith. It's the best hadith, the Quran, right? What other hadith would you believe after the Quran? That's Allah asked this rhetorical question. That's not my question, right? So, we are good. Alhamdulillah, if we just stick to the Quran in a sincere way, and other books, secondary text, yeah, we can use it, to broaden our understanding, our knowledge, but ultimately you have to go back to Quran. That is the prime directive. Anyway, I'll end there. Oh, my video was off.
You basically spot on what you just said. Allah tells us that He will reveal the truth that is from what is inside of ourselves and on the far horizons. So we have to keep learning Okay, we will continue to get revelations from Allah. That just won't be a new book. He will show us the truth on the far horizons and in ourselves. And there's lots of different ways you can interpret that ayah, but I look at what astronomy has found out just in the last 100 years, that there is a far horizon to the universe. There's a spot beyond which we will never see what's there because everything's moving away from us so fast. At about 13 billion light years away, it's gone from ever being able to be seen. That's a far horizon, if I ever heard of one. And as far as within ourselves, psychology has learned more about the innards of the human mind and soul than the ancients ever knew, yet Allah has mapped them out for us already in his book in ways that we're just beginning to understand. And that is basically the Quran proving itself over and over again. The earth and the sky were all one thing at one time. Cosmology has already proven that. The Quran said it 1400 years ago. It's hard to convince a non-believer using just those facts, but they're definitely a comfort to a believer. There's so many gems in the Quran that a human being can never get done reading it. Yes, it's good to study what other peoples in the past have collected and believed in, including Hadith, including Indian, I forget the names of their scriptures. I just had one on my desk a minute ago, but the Gitas, you're muted. Yeah, yeah. The different scriptures, the Talmud. Again, Talmud, in my humble opinion, is the Hadith for Judaism, and has the same problems. It's what they call the spoken Torah. A rabbi called it that, so I can say that that's what they call the Talmud. And we can read those things. We can see what they believed in their day and why they believed it. But as Sister Aisha Musa has often repeated, quoting right from the Quran, though that is a people who have passed away. They had their issues in their day, and this is how they dealt with them. We are always going to be challenged now, this day. How do I take the wisdom that Allah has given me in the Quran and apply it to the world as I see it right now? If I have a debt, what does Allah tell me to do with the debt? If somebody's asking me for help, how does Allah tell me to deal with that? I should help, but I shouldn't be a spendthrift. It's very clear if we remember that Quran is the first place to look for the answer, not all these other collections of books. That's to me what Islam is. Start with the Quran, and if you're dealing with something that's outside of a question of deen, yes, there are sciences and there's math books and there's chemistry books and there's cooking books. Okay. All those things are useful. They're not deen. So again, I'm getting on my soapbox. So let me do that. We haven't heard from you in a while, Wesley. Are you still with us? You know you're muted? All right. Oh, I guess oh, there you are. If you're talking, we can't hear you. You're not coming through clearly. Try turning your microphone off and back on. That sometimes works for me.
Wesley, you're lagging.
Yeah, we're just getting a buzz from you.
You're lagging.
Yeah. Okay, we're 10 after 5. Anybody? Yeah, we'll wait for him to come back. I think he's trying the Sayed solution. Leave and come back and see if that fixes the audio. As a computer professional, my automatic solution is turn it off and turn it back on. Did that fix it? I've told my wife that if I'm ever in a coma, tell the doctors to turn everything off and back on again. And I'll be fine. Okay.
I wonder what you all's story is on how you started to learn or start Islam. Learning about it. I wonder, actually. How did you guys reach this stage?
You want to know how I came to Islam?
Yep.
It's not a secret. I've published my path to Islam over on Islam Awakened. It's pretty common knowledge. Going back a lot of years, I grew up here in the West in a Christian family, and I already had my doubts about Christianity about the time I turned 11 and walked away from it. Okay. So for years after that, I pretty much wandered with no real belief. I won't go say that I was atheist, but I was close to being one. I was more like a hardcore agnostic. I kind of felt that there was something more than just this physical universe, but I wasn't that interested in figuring out what it was. And I eventually got into computer business. I moved from Ohio to Texas. I'm telling all the backstory to answer your question. When I moved to, I basically learned some computer skills when I was in Ohio, and I was teaching a class on programming, and the paychecks started bouncing. So that's a clue. That means it's time to find a different job. And at that time, Houston was a boom town. Everybody was moving there to get a job. So I did the same thing. I got a computer operator job in near Houston, and from there I rapidly became a system programmer. I started moving up the ranks and changed jobs. Became a manager of a small computing team at a chain, corporate headquarters for a chain of stores here. And as I moved up the ranks in corporate America, got more money, all the usual success stories. Bought my wife an expensive car, bought a house in the expensive suburb. And it came to a point where I was going through a divorce. And after I got divorced, I was thinking, okay, I smoked everything there was to smoke back in the 70s, and I'm Greg Kovalik. Stuff can't hurt me now. Let's see what they're smoking these days. So I started checking out what people are smoking these days, and I was wrong. It can hurt me. Okay. I'm not Superman. I'm not 10 feet tall and bulletproof, and very quickly became a cocaine addict. And from being a cocaine addict, I'd started into that journey owning my own company and having over $100,000 in a retirement account. Eventually, I discovered that the state of Texas doesn't like people doing cocaine, and I became a guest in one of their establishments. And I can tell you that it's not the nicest place to stay. The help is very rude. By the time I got out of jail, I had about $8,000 left, and everything else was gone. And the good news is, while I sat there in jail, I was invited to a Muslim learning session because Ramadan had come around. And the Muslims in that jail were given the freedom to practice Islam, and they invited people to Ramadan. And I became one of those people invited. And my first occurrence of being in basically a classroom Muslim session, a very good reciter recited the azan, and tears just started flowing down my face. I can't make that up. I can't tell you what that feeling is like. But I sat there in a room full of felons, convicted felons, crying like a baby. Word of that never got back to my cell block, which tells you something right there. But I spent the rest of my time in that short jail sentence borrowing every copy of a Quran translation that I could get my hands on and reading the Quran because I knew whatever touched me that day in that classroom was something I needed to know more about. And I loved what I read in the Quran. I could feel that it was coming from our Creator. As I mentioned earlier in this class session, there were a few verses that didn't sound right, and I managed to find out that other translators handled them differently. So I got past that little barrier. There's a backstory to that, but I'll come back to it later. Anyway, that was my introduction to Islam, and by the grace of Allah, I was introduced to Islam through the Quran alone. Later, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Later, I would try to read these other things that Islam believed in called the Hadith. And going from the Quran to Hadith, it was like you're walking down this pristine, beautiful white sand beach with beautiful blue water. And there's some bushes, and you take a turn and you go through these bushes, and suddenly you're in a downtown slum area with garbage all over the streets. I'm exaggerating a little bit. Not all hadith are garbage, but that's what it felt like going from the Quran to hadith collections. So I stepped back. I don't want to go there right now. I kept reading the Quran, and that has been my path ever since. I'm not going to say that it was an absolutely smooth trip from then on. I've told this story to people before, and it kind of gives the impression that I sat in that classroom. I heard the azan, golden light filled the room, and I never touched drugs again. I wish that were true. I will tell you that I never touched alcohol again, but I was still married to another addict. Okay. So when I came out, it only took about 3 days to get back into that world. And it took standing up, trying to get clean, falling down, going a little longer into the pain, standing up, trying to get clean, falling down, and eventually realizing I can't do this alone. And just showing up at mosque after I clean myself up isn't going to do it. Saying 5 prayers a day isn't going to do it. I found a 12-step program, and they teach the idea of relying on a higher power. I was not an agnostic anymore. I knew there was a higher power. So, whereas 12-step programs like AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, wouldn't have worked for me 2 years earlier, now they did. I could understand what the 12 steps are saying because this is how you come to submit to a law. Because at step 3 is we made a decision to surrender to our higher power. And that was my real Islam, understanding that I have to surrender completely. I'd read the book and I love the book and I like the message and I trust the message, but I was trying to do it all myself. That's not going to work. You have to surrender to Allah and then He will help you. And that's what happened when I finally started working with 12-step programs. And very soon after that, I discovered that even us Muslims have our own 12-step program. It's called Milati Islami. There's a website, milatiislami.org, that teaches the 12 steps using language from the Quran. And that's a very valuable thing, especially for some inner city youth. And that's been the bulk of my trip into Islam and my journey since. I want to bring the Quran to as many people as possible. And in addition, anybody in Islam that has problems with substances or addiction, I want to get them to Malati Islami because that's a tool that can help them climb out. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, Subhanallah. I'm happy for you.
Thank you. That all happened 20 years ago. So more than 20 now, but yes, that's how I got here.
Well, we all learn from experiences. My personal story, if you'd like to hear.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
My, my story began when I was in my senior year of high school. I was going to begin there.
Okay.
So I was having a little bit, I was losing hope in Islam. So randomly, I just sat in the car and I was like, Dear Allah, if you are real, please struck the ground with lightning. for 3 seconds in 5 seconds. I counted, and exactly at 5 seconds, lightning struck the ground for 3 seconds. Yes, exactly. And I stared wide eyed and I was like, okay, God is real. I have to study my religion now. And I
Oh,
did. I did. Yeah, subhanallah. It was a crazy moment in my life. I'll always remember that. So I started. I cried a lot at some misogynistic views some extremists had about Islam. Yeah, now to think of it, that wasn't the best place to begin with. But anyway, so I did. And then I figured, wait, no. I know the virtues of Islam. I need to follow those virtues. I decided to read the Quran. I was like, nah. You know the verse that talks about the supposed head covers? I was like, wait, this doesn't make sense. So I looked up, found the actual meaning, and I was like, wait, if people lie about this, what else could they be lying about? So I went all detective mode, and you can guess what happens next. I searched things up. I fought with people. I discovered things. I discovered false hadiths. I discovered new verses. I memorized things. I realized a bunch of more things, even more things. And madhabs, as you might know, Maliki, Salafi, Hanfi, and Hanbali. I decided to stay out of these because these are man made schools of thoughts. That's what I think about madhabs. So I chose to not deal with madhabs anymore. In the past, I used to, but now I don't. So I dealt with a bunch. I proved a bunch of hadiths wrong and false based on Quran and its virtues. And so far, I realized that Allah's Quran is the only truth to exist, like genuinely in that sense. I already knew that, but that was pre imprinted, you know? I was born Muslim, then I gained more hope. So, to sum it all up, I simply just learned, searched up. Now, there's one thing about my entire story actually. I did not have books, as you know. I used internet and my own school books. I live in Pakistan. We learned these things in school actually. You understand?
absolutely.
Yeah. School books and the internet. Very lousy internet, mind you. Absolute headache. Oh my god. Anyway, so I had to look up multiple translations and fatwas. I realized, nuh-uh, I'm not dealing with fatwas. They're not something I'm looking for. So I looked up multiple hadiths, Quran verses, translations, like at least 10 different translations I had to look up. And so far, I had to come up with a conclusion based on my current understanding of Quran's virtues and including what I learned in school. My family had a bunch of books about hadiths and Quran. We have multiple volumes of Bukhari, Muslim, Nisai, etc. So, yes, we did. I did. Took the books out after a month of this hectic internet thingy. And that's the main part where I got most of my knowledge from.
Alhamdulillah.
Some hadiths were wrong, so I used Quran translations, which were even more of a problem because I was not great in my native language. Okay? My native language is Urdu. I'm
Hmm.
Pakistani. So it was hectic because I'm not good at reading Urdu. I'm not good at it. So It took me hours just to read one page. But so far, I managed to understand it, and I even asked my mom to get me an English translation book as well. I got the English translation book. I remember many years ago, I was like, nah, this does not feel right. Just like how you described your experience, this does not feel right. I had the same experience. I was like, what the hell is this saying? This does not feel like what Allah would say.
Exactly.
So back to the internet and back to the dictionary as well. Now to think of it starting at women problems was not the best idea because it was an emotional toll. I dropped down, got back up, just like you. Got back up, fell again. The entire story, you can imagine the rest. Now, I would also like to discuss the theory about niqab, face
Okay.
veil. So, my mom used to believe that face veil was compulsory because that was what my grandma told her. And I tried to convince her again, no, it does not make sense for khimar to mean head cover, and neither does it make sense for it to be face veil. My mom didn't listen. She said, no, I believe what I believe, you believe what you believe. So I instead, just a very couple of, no, it didn't take long. It was like just a few years ago, actually, when I showed my mom the evidences. I gathered the evidences, showed it to her. I was like, hey, mom, read this. She did read that. And she was like, okay, makes sense. I believe in this now. Pretty straightforward. My story is not that crazy, but honestly speaking, it was a very big turn in my life to finally understand what the Quran is really about. It's not just about prayers, roza, namaz, zakat. It's not just about that. It's about everything. And I mean everything. Everything answer is written in there. You just have
Mhm.
to read it. You just have to use your brain. And so, well, I did. End of story. Peace. Anyway, I
Thank
would
you.
like to hear from the others.
Okay,
Yes,
we
you
have.
had to say something.
How did you come to where you were, Sayed? Or Dr. Hanan, would you like to tell us?
Yes.
Uh, Interesting. So as a young person, my father, who had, he was a community judge, also a Quran scholar, if we can say it nowadays, right? So I always had sat through the community meetings with my dad as a young kid. Maybe I was about 5, 6 years old till I was about 15 years old. So I had gone through a tremendous amount of questions and answers of people from very low of the low to the highest class of the elite coming to my dad, with discussing their issues, whatever that is, religious. We had Christians, Hindus, and Muslims, right? And also some Buddhists and pagans. So as a community judge, he had to, deal with all kinds of people, right? So I witnessed and I saw throughout those formative years of my life how he had constructed the interpretation of things, not just the Quran. For the Christians, he would use the Bible, and for Hindus, he would ask them question, what does your book say, right? And for Muslims also would ask the same question to Allah. What do you think the Allah's book says or the Hadith says, right? So when they would fail to explain to him, then he would tell them, okay, if we see it this way, what have you, right? So as I was growing up with this, he encouraged me. I was about maybe 12 years old then, to study, or read the books of philosophy, right? So I was a very, how should I put it, weird kid, by the way. Weird meaning, I was deep into thinking, right? All kinds of stuff. So especially Quranic stories, right, would just blow my mind away. So I would ask him question about like Yaqub, Jacob in the Quran, right? His stories begin in chapter 2, I think verse 144 or 45. So as the story begins and I read the story, I get blown away by that. So wow, why is Allah telling us these stories here in this manner, right? So I was reading the Quran in English, of course, and Arabic I knew, but I did not know how to understand the Arabic at the time. So, and also reading philosophy, books of philosophy, and other books, plus school books, right? So by the time I was 16 years old, I was pretty much tending towards, challenging questions. Really, God exists? I mean, if He's existing, why all this kind of a mess everywhere, right? All kinds of war going on, fighting going on, people suffering. So then, of course, I land in the USA from my high school. I'm here, and then I bring my Quran with me, Quran and my backpack, and my physics. My major was physics. So I'm studying these things, this book called Quran, and I have a lot of Arabs, students with me, from Middle East, Jordan, Palestine, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and then some brothers from South Asia too, Southeast Asia. So as we are, going back and forth, and I would have the Quran in the Student Union Center open and reading, and I'm trying to understand this book, because then of course I read Aristotle, Plato, some of his writings, Republic and all that, and a little bit of, I think, Kant, and then Heidegger, and I'm very confused young man, by the way, horribly confused. I'm looking at things and I'm saying it doesn't add up. Nothing adds up anymore for me. So as I'm going through these intense, turmoil in my own head, and then I began to see the Quran in a different light. I say, you know what? Let me read the Quran, more attention, paying more attention to it, and asking question why God is saying these things in this line, in this verse, right? And that is where my journey began. And then I noticed that the book began to speak to me in a way that is how I would attend the Quran, how I'd attend the Quran day or night, right? The book would come back to me, respond to me with my attention to it. Like there was a proportional relationship between the two, my attention and my sincerity, and the book is speaking back to me. So I found that, not enlightening, like a little bit like, oh my God, how come the others don't see it, what I'm seeing, right? So this is when I became very serious, that when I began to ask the Arab brothers, I say, hey, tell me what this verse is. I know the English, but you tell me what do you think? Oh my God, to my surprise, none of them knew Quranic Arabic, other than Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, right? Surah Fatiha's first 3-4 lines. They had no idea the rest of the ayah in the Surah Fatiha, what it meant in a clear, concise manner, right? So I'm thinking, I say, this is Arabic. And you, oh, no, this is Quranic Arabic, and we speak a standard dialect. I said, what the hell? I said, how come no one told me that? So as my journey continued, right, I began to realize that this is the Lisan al-Quran, right? Lisan Arabiya. There's reason behind that, So as I then began to study, I was doing my college and my, of course, Quran research and study. It began then, and I'm to this day I'm continuing. So I have concluded few things. Conclusion meaning building my theories on why certain Muslim groups understood the way they understood, what kind of mode of thinking they were using, right, to construct their meaning or to interpret it from certain cultural background or some stories they heard growing up, or a Talmudic narrative or the Jewish stories, like when the Qab ibn Ahbar became Muslim. He was a son of a Jewish rabbi. He was also a rabbi right after the death of the Prophet, right? And he joined Umar bin Khattab, and his stories, he would tell them stories from the Talmud, right, to the Sahabas, the companions. And I realized much later, a lot of the stories that he had told has gotten somehow incorporated into our understanding of many of the Quranic verses from that angle, right? That's one of the example I'm giving. I'm not all of it, okay, of course. So I began to challenge more, right? I began to have a lot of problem in my own head, the contradiction I'm finding, what they are saying, what the Quran is saying, what they are telling me I should believe or I should think, and what the Quran is repeating, repeatedly saying to me that no, this is what Allah is saying, right? So, then I went through uh, other studies like metaphysics, and then a lot of Sufi books, how they understood Quran, and then different sects, all four sects plus the Shia. I spent time with them. I spent time with all the group sects in Islam. In last 18 years, I spent about 4 years with Shia brothers and about 2 years with Salafi, Wahhabi. I did all these studies, right? I spent time with them, had, spent time in the masjid with them, did a lot of halakha with them to understand how they understand, to understand where they're coming from, how they believe what they believe, right? To teach me so I can believe like them, right? So it was a challenge for me and them too. Then I realized that they are all running on their stories, and the stories became more powerful than the truth of the Quran, right? So as I was realizing this thing, I that was about almost 14, 16 years ago. I also began to study psychology, right? And I got deep into it. Then I was taking some clinical psychology courses, right? I said, you know what? I have to understand this too, a little bit of human mind, because we think both slow and fast. So that also helped me to realize that slow thinking is better because my brain can handle more cognitive load or strain, and I can understand Quran better, maybe inshallah. So this is my journey right now. I'm on this journey. I'm trying to discern as much as I can what I'm reading, from the Arabic first. Then I do go through the Arabic concordance, then the grammar and all that, and try to see if there is some better interpretation we can come up with in the future. And now I'm 100% sure that we will have very soon very good Quranic interpretation into English language, because that is the dominant language right now globally, right? Pretty much every country, the people speaks English. So that is my dream to have some good people around me to produce a Arabic English Quran that is more up to date and more meaningful, that where you can make sense of things, not just because God is saying this thing and I've heard the stories for the reason for the revelation, so it has to be that way. No, exactly what God is saying, as much as we can get close to the perfectness of it, right? Through multiple collective intelligence, not just my head, other good people, right? I have some few people in my mind already. I'm talking to them. So we can do this interpretation for the future, hopefully the next 10, 15 years. It's not that easy. And inshallah, I think we will have a global upheaval, huge revolution, right? Inshallah, in the Muslim mind and the non-Muslims too. So that's where I am right now. Hope and dream with that.
Alhamdulillah. May Allah assist you in that effort. again and again. All right, we're a good 40 minutes past our normal class time. Does anybody want to continue? And the only person we haven't heard the story from is Dr. Hanan. Would you like to tell us how you came to where you are now, your belief? If not, it'll be about time to close the class down for the day. And you're muted if you don't know it. Okay. Brothers and sisters, brother and sisters, I would say let's close down this class. It has been excellent. I will definitely be thinking everything we've heard today. Very
Yes,
educational.
thank you. I enjoyed this class a lot.
Thank you. And to the best of my knowledge, inshallah, we will be back with a normal class this time at 4 o'clock Eastern Time next Sunday with Sister Aisha Musa and Brother Farouk as the teachers going into the next subject in the syllabus. And I'll be doing my homework for that. And I recommend everybody else do the same thing because they go submarine deep into what the Arabic words mean and how they are dealt with in various parts of the Quran. Allah be with you. I'm turning off the recording now.